He broke me for years, A. Hanks confesses, and with those 6 words she blows a hole in Hollywood's happiest ever after myth. For decades we believed Tom Hanks was the flawless nice guy, the loving dad who could do no wrong, but his firstborn is finally cracking that polished veneer. Tonight she's naming the exact moment her childhood shattered, the unseen illness that twisted her mother's smile into silence, and the hushed phone call that sent her father running toward a brand new life. This isn't tabloid gossip, it's the forgotten side of a blockbuster success story, told by the daughter who watched it unravel from a bedroom doorway. Stay with me, because what EA reveals about betrayal, regret, and the price of an Oscar-winning career will flip everything you thought you knew about America's most beloved actor, and expose the heartbreak Hollywood begged us to ignore. Samantha Lewis and Tom, still just a hungry theater kid from Oakland, shared a futon that groaned louder than the fridge. Toddler Colin snored between them like a human traffic cone, and baby Elizabeth napped inside a dresser drawer lined with flannel towels. The ceiling leaked, the heater tripped the breaker if the toaster was on, and dinner rotated between tuna casserole and whatever coupons could stretch farthest. Yet 8-year-old S swore those nights glittered. Fame in those days was a punchline, something they joked about when the rent envelope looked thin. But success has a habit of redrawing dreams without asking permission, and the first red line appeared the moment Splash cannonballed into theaters. Phones started ringing like fire alarms. Agent messages stacked higher than the unpaid gas bills. Overnight, Tom Hanks morphed from the funny guy in acting class to Hollywood's newest miracle. Studios offered salaries Samantha couldn't even pronounce, and strangers asked for autographs while she hunted for diaper coupons. The family's first real paycheck landed smack on their fault line. Tom sprinted toward every opportunity, terrified the magic might vanish if he slowed. Samantha stayed home, terrified the man she loved was vanishing in real time. Wedged between Fisher-Price toys and newspaper clippings, felt the floorboards tremble even before she had vocabulary for marital drift. She remembers the night her mom turned off the TV mid-sentence, staring at Tom's smiling face on Entertainment Tonight while whispering, "He's walking into a life I don't recognize." That single sentence, delivered like a prayer nobody heard, lodged in the girl's memory like a shard of glass. Because success doesn't mend pressure points, it turns them seismic, and the first aftershock was already rumbling beneath their feet. Tom promised the chaos was temporary, but every new blockbuster pushed the finish line farther down the calendar. Samantha clapped hardest at each premiere, yet her smile stretched so thin it looked photoshopped onto her face. She became default parent, PDA sign UPS, loose tooth extractions, midnight thermometer checks, while Tom vanished into reshoots that ran long and junkets that somehow always landed on school play nights. Money poured in, but time evaporated faster. Elizabeth remembers silent dinners where forks ticked like metronomes, and her mother's gaze flickered toward the front door that rarely opened before bedtime. When Columbia dangled a multi-picture deal worth more than the couple's combined lifetime earnings, Samantha wanted Sundays in a backyard garden. Tom wanted box office armor. Their conversations shifted from whispered compromises to weaponized negotiations, volume rising alongside quarterly earnings. To the outside world, they were still the sweet college sweethearts who'd beaten the odds. Inside, they were roommates exchanging logistics in clipped bursts, while the real conversations died quietly in their throats. One icy February evening, the family phone rang from a Mexico location shoot. Another scheduled delay, another apology that sounded suspiciously rehearsed. Samantha nodded through the explanation, but a bright, feminine laugh crackled on the long-distance line, and her hand froze mid-air. She didn't know a name yet, only that a new character had entered the script without her approval. Minutes later, she caught her breath against the kitchen counter. Rubbing a sudden ache in her hip, she blamed on stress. In retrospect, that twinge was the first flare of the illness doctors hadn't diagnosed, a warning shot cloaked as muscle pain. Years later, EA would write that the real reason her parents broke wasn't a tabloid scandal at all. It was her father's panic when he met pain he couldn't fix. But in that moment, Samantha just pressed her palm harder into her side, swallowed her questions, and told Tom to get some sleep. The click of the receiver felt like a door slamming in an empty hallway. The next morning, trade blogs buzzed about his electric chemistry, with co-star Rita Wilson on the set of Volunteers. The rumor mill had found its headline, and the Shoebox family braced for Quake #2. Rita's laugh was apparently contagious. Crew diaries leaked that she and Tom finished each other's punchlines. Tabloids printed grainy photos of them trading inside jokes at rap parties. And industry columnists floated the phrase Hollywood's next power duo. Publicists insisted the bond was strictly professional, and no concrete evidence ever surfaced to prove otherwise. This story remains an industry whisper, not a court document. But pain doesn't wait for confirmation. Samantha sliced those magazines straight into recycling the minute they hit the porch. Yet the headlines still screamed from inside the bin. New love on set, Tom and Rita, sparks fly. Late on a Tuesday, I padded to the kitchen for water and overheard her mother whisper, yelling into the handset, voice splintering. "I can't compete with a studio romance, Tom." That sentence tattooed itself on the child's memory. She repeated it under her breath all week, not yet understanding the weight it carried. Meanwhile, Samantha's mystery aches grew bolder, radiating from hip to spine, punctuated by fevers that left her drenched by dawn. She hid the symptoms beneath oversized sweaters and a schedule so full nobody noticed how often she sat down. Tom, orbiting new galaxies of fame, noticed only that she seemed tired on the rare nights their schedules overlapped. He promised they would take a proper vacation as soon as the shoot wrapped. 3 weeks, no calls, just us. But Big was already queuing, and the finish line moved yet again. On set, Rita sent Samantha a friendly note. According to EA, it read, "Hope you're doing well. Tom says the kids are thriving." Samantha thanked her graciously, then folded the paper until the words tore. It wasn't malice. It was the sound of her life changing shape without her consent. And inside her body, something malignant was gathering strength, preparing to announce itself in a language no Hollywood agent could translate. Weeks later, the family attended a red carpet event where flashbulbs painted Tom and Samantha in strobes of white-hot admiration. Reporters lobbed questions about upcoming roles, but one voice shouted over the crowd, "Tom, does Rita Wilson make you laugh more than your wife?" Security drowned the query in hustle, yet Samantha felt its echo ricochet inside her ribs. That night she lay awake counting the seconds between her husband's breaths, measuring distance in heartbeats. When dawn seeped through the curtains, the ache in her hip radiated like wildfire down her leg. She almost woke Tom to drive her to the hospital, but he was already suiting up for an early call. She bit her lip, smiled, and wished him luck. By the time the door clicked shut, she was alone with a pain no spotlight could disguise. The tabloids would spend months debating whether Tom had emotionally checked out. What nobody printed, because nobody knew, was that Samantha's body had begun its quiet rebellion, one cell at a time. Hollywood loves a tidy narrative. Boy meets girl, boy becomes star, boy meets new girl, marriage collapses. The truth is rarely that linear. A. Hanks would later write, "Our family didn't implode because of one woman. It unraveled because my dad couldn't bear the sound of my mom's pain." She insists the real breaking point was watching Samantha's sparkle dim and realizing no amount of box office gold could reignite it. Whether that assessment is compassion, revision, or raw honesty, it lands harder than any tabloid bombshell. Because it suggests the world's nicest guy wasn't running toward excitement. He was running away from helplessness. And helplessness, for a man celebrated as Hollywood's everyman hero, can feel like the ultimate scandal. By the time Big wrapped, studio chatter crowned Tom Hanks the next bankable leading man, and Rita Wilson's name kept surfacing in gossip round UPS of on-set best friends destined for more. Samantha, meanwhile, scheduled a doctor's appointment she told no one about. Tests would reveal the first markers of bone cancer, though the diagnosis was still months away. She left the clinic with a fistful of prescriptions and a medical brochure she shoved to the bottom of her purse. That evening, Tom called from a late-night table read, voice buzzing with creative adrenaline. Samantha listened, congratulated him, and said nothing of biopsies or blood work. Instead, she told him the kids had a spelling bee next week and joked they'd probably inherit his spelling skills, not hers. Tom laughed, promised to send flowers, then faded back into rehearsal. Samantha hung up, pressed her palm to her ribs, and whispered, "I can't compete with a studio romance," as if repeating it might change its meaning. Upstairs, A heard her mother's voice crack, but the words were too soft to decode. What she did understand was the trembling in the walls, the shoebox shaking on its foundation, warning of the rupture no one was ready to name. And so, before a single divorce paper was drafted, before Rita Wilson became a permanent footnote in Tom's Wikipedia bio, and years before the internet would crown him America's dad, one brave, fragile smile was already fading from the family portrait. The next tremor, legal, medical, emotional, was days away, waiting just out of frame, ready to split their world in two. Samantha woke one morning to a pain that felt as if her bones were humming. It began in her hip, shot down her thigh, and settled in her lower back like a brick she couldn't put down. She tried to blame it on stress, on the cheap mattress, on that hour she spent crouched in Colin's closet searching for his missing sneaker. But the ache didn't care for excuses. She booked a quiet appointment at Cedars-Sinai, told the receptionist her husband was out of town and she'd handle the paperwork later. After a battery of scans, the doctor spoke in a slow, measured cadence that made her stomach churn. Lesions? Biopsy? Possible metastasis? Samantha nodded, fingers digging crescents into her palms, and whispered that she couldn't fall apart right now. The kids had a spelling bee on Thursday. That afternoon she sat through the competition with a smile that barely held, clapping so hard her hands stung whenever Elizabeth spelled a word correctly. She said nothing of oncologists. She said nothing about cancer. She simply watched her daughter's eyes shine and memorized the shape of that joy in case she needed to recall it later in a hospital room full of antiseptic and fluorescent hum. Tom was filming night shoots on the East Coast when the diagnosis landed. Bone cancer? Stage still uncertain. Samantha delivered the news almost apologetically, as though she'd dented a rental car and the insurance forms were going to be a hassle. Tom flew home between scenes, but the reunion was awkward. He wanted action plans, second opinions. She wanted his arm around her without the hum of solutions. And in the middle of this uncertainty, Rita Wilson re-entered the conversation, not as a rumor but as a comfort. She sent meals, called to check on the kids, and dropped off a handwritten note that read, "Lean on whoever you need." Samantha thanked her, but the gesture blurred the borders she'd fought to keep intact. One night at 2 a.m., pain spiking, Samantha whispered to Tom that she feared becoming a supporting character in her own life story. Tom held her hand, but somewhere in the clasp they both felt the gulf widening. The next morning, Samantha watched him pack a garment bag for a reshoot and realized the marriage had shifted from partnership to performance. Two actors nailing their lines, neither believing the script's ending anymore. She kissed him goodbye anyway, heart pounding with the secret knowledge that the hardest scene was still to come. The official paperwork arrived in April. Tom filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The legal phrase sounded sterile, almost clinical, compared to the fever dream reality unfolding behind closed doors. To protect public perception and the kids, both camps agreed to keep details sealed, but leaks trickled out. A rumored $5 million settlement, Samantha retaining primary custody, Tom agreeing to bi-coastal visitation aligned with his shooting calendar. Elizabeth, 11 and too smart for euphemisms, overheard a lawyer mention asset division and imagined her family being sliced into percentage points. She sat in a courthouse playroom signing coloring pages while her parents initialed the end of their orbit around each other. Colin pretended not to notice but started drifting after school, gaming at friends' houses until dinner to dodge the tension curling through the apartment like fog. When Tom returned to pick up the kids for his weekends, Samantha's smile was cordial, brittle at the edges. Tom's small talk landed like feathers soaked in water, soft yet unsalvageable heavy. In interviews he talked about respect, deep care, focusing on the children. He never mentioned the midnight drives where Samantha clenched the steering wheel, pain flaring, repeating a mantra. "You can do this alone." Tabloids, hungry for scandal, framed the divorce as a love triangle payoff, plastering Rita's face beside Tom's in lurid split screens. Samantha gave no comment. What hurt wasn't a headline. It was bedtime stories read over long-distance lines, medical charts she faced without the man who once swore to carry half her burdens. And yet, beneath the heartbreak, she forged a fragile sense of command. Cancer treatments every other Thursday, acting workshops on Zoom for extra income, grocery lists stuck to the fridge like miniature battle plans. She would not die a footnote in someone else's redemption arc. Not if grit had any say in the matter. Life split into parallel timelines. In Los Angeles, Samantha's world shrank to infusion suites scented faintly of bleach, prescription bottles lined like chess pieces, and the rhythmic reassurance of her children's laughter filling the tiny rental she'd found near Cedars. In New York or Vancouver or whatever location called next, Tom's world exploded with premieres, award galas, interviews praising his everyman warmth. They toggled between them. Weekdays handing her mom water when nausea surged. Weekends clutching VIP passes at movie sets buzzing with Rita's quicksilver humor. Two families, two gravitational pulls. Holidays became logistical puzzles solved by airline apps and custody calendars. One Thanksgiving, Samantha spooned mashed potatoes onto paper plates in their kitchenette, while a televised Macy's parade showed Tom, waving from a float 2,000 miles away. She muted the TV but couldn't erase the image of her children's father grinning into a crowd that had no idea a woman at home was memorizing chemo schedules like scripture. Cancer, however, does not negotiate for peace. It flared again in late 2001, this time unapologetic, colonizing Samantha's lungs. She hid the prognosis until Christmas, wanting one more season of colored lights and normalcy. On a crisp December morning, she gathered Colin and Elizabeth and at the kitchen table and explained, in language stripped of drama, that her body was tired of fighting. Elizabeth swallowed a howl and instead asked practical questions. How soon? How painful? Is their medicine strong enough? Samantha answered honestly, then offered peppermint cocoa while tears tracked down her cheeks. Tom flew in that night, Rita by his side. He paced the hallway before entering, rehearsing grief lines he'd never wished to memorize. The visit was tender but brief. Hollywood obligations pulled him back, leaving Samantha cloaked in antiseptic and resolve. In February 2002, with Elizabeth gripping her hand and Colin humming softly to fill the silence, Samantha Lewis slipped away. The funeral was private, tasteful. A press release later praising her quiet strength. Yet for one 20-year-old daughter, the silence left behind was anything but quiet. It clanged like a broken bell inside her skull. Grief has its own physics. Elizabeth moved to New York within months, chasing journalism school and a city too loud to let sorrow echo. She stopped attending family premieres, ignored half-siblings' birthdays, and let her father's voicemails stack up like unread chapters. Reporters asked Tom about life post-Oscar, about his beautiful new marriage to Rita, about his philanthropic work. Nobody asked about the daughter who'd vanished into Manhattan's subway system collecting bylines instead of red carpet passes. When acquaintances did bring up EA, Tom called her independent, with the soft pride of a dad convincing himself everything was fine. But late nights, his phone lit up with her absence. For years, they communicated through forwarded articles. She'd send him a feature she wrote. He'd mail back a note scribbled on hotel stationery. So proud of you, kiddo. It wasn't connection, it was a ceasefire conducted in courier envelopes. Time, though, keeps rewriting even the hardest stories. In 2023, Elizabeth recorded a podcast episode, ostensibly about literary legacies, that detoured into a raw 5-minute monologue. How she survived a childhood split between hospital hallways and award show green rooms. How her mother's voice still whispered at dawn. How forgiving her father didn't mean forgetting the emptiness that trailed his shadow. The clip went viral, ricocheting across social feeds under the headline, "Tom Hanks' daughter breaks her silence." Comment sections exploded. Some hailed her bravery. Others bristled at any suggestion that America's most beloved actor might have failed in private. The internet fights lasted days. The underlying pain had lasted decades. Yet inside the tempest, father and daughter finally scheduled a face-to-face over coffee in Santa Monica. They talked for 4 hours, no publicists, no bullet-point agendas. Just memories, regrets, and a shared love for the woman the world barely remembered. Tom listened, eyes glassy. when A said, "Mom didn't resent your success. She resented disappearing from your story." He apologized without excuses, and though apologies cannot resurrect the past, they can loosen the knots choking the future. They ended the night hugging outside a cafe while paparazzi snapped from a distance. The flashbulbs oddly gentle this time. Less spectacle, more witness. Years later, Elizabeth told an interviewer that the hug didn't fix everything, but it stopped the freefall. "It let us start climbing out of the crater," she said, instead of just measuring how deep it was. She launched a scholarship in Samantha's name for single mothers pursuing the arts, channeling pain into legacy. Tom matched the first round of funding quietly, no press release, a gesture that spoke in the language Samantha once understood best: action over promises. And in that overlap of grief, accountability, and forward motion, a fractured family stitched itself into a new, imperfect quilt. Patches of sorrow, swatches of hard-won grace, seems resilient enough to hold. Elizabeth and Hank spent 2 decades polishing her pain into silence. But silence, she found, is brittle. One sharp memory and it shatters. The viral podcast clip was only the first crack. By 2025, she was finished tiptoeing around half-told truths. Her memoir, working title Shoebox Galaxies, was already in edits when she sat across from a documentary crew and finally voiced the line that would detonate across every entertainment feed. "Dad didn't leave because of Rita. He left because Mom's pain terrified him. And terror makes heroes run." She didn't say it to vilify him. She said it because the simplest version of the truth had never fit into a headline, and the complicated version might save some other family from mistaking avoidance for protection. The camera operator later admitted he forgot to breathe during that take. The room pulsed with the sound of decades-late honesty finally landing where it belonged. What followed was the inevitable backlash. Think pieces accused her of tarnishing America's dad. Comments flooded with caps-locked rage. Let him be. Yet for every furious post, another viewer whispered gratitude. Children of addicts, divorcees, cancer survivors grateful someone famous was mapping the geography of ache they called home. A responded to none of it. She spent those weeks coaching herself through insomnia with the same mantra her mother once used before auditions. Tell the truth, trust the net will appear. And the net did appear in an unexpected place. A handwritten letter from her father, pages and pages of looping script acknowledging every omission, every too late phone call, every night he chose the set over the dinner table. "I was scared," he wrote, "and believing my own legend was easier than facing hers." He didn't ask her to pull punches, only to leave room in the narrative for his own reckoning. She read the letter twice, tucked it between manuscript pages, and kept writing. Viewers who'd clicked to glimpse Hollywood scandal soon realized they were witnessing something rarer. 2 people excavating a shared past without flinching. Midway through the documentary trailer, A looks straight into the lens and asks, "How many of us let ambition outrun intimacy? And how long before the people we love refuse to keep pace?" It's a question meant for her father, but also for every audience member scrolling on autopilot. Comments beneath the teaser spiraled into confessions. Nurses who hadn't called their moms in months, sales reps missing their kids' recitals, 20-somethings who hadn't processed a parent's illness because deadlines felt safer than grief. The algorithm, usually a carnival barker for gossip, stumbled into a support group. Tom Hanks broke his public silence with a short statement on the Today Show. No defensiveness, no PR gloss. Just a clear acknowledgement that he and Samantha made choices, some noble, some cowardly, all human. "If my daughter's story helps anyone sit longer with discomfort instead of sprinting from it, then I can live with the discomfort too," he said, eyes rimmed red. The clip rocketed across social platforms, and the outrage engine sputtered. It's hard to keep slinging rotten fruit when the target nods and says, "You're right, that bruise is real." For viewers, the narrative shifted from blame to reckoning, then to something like relief. Hollywood rarely stages an unguarded apology. It felt revolutionary in its ordinariness. Still, EA refused tidy closure. Her final chapter lands where the cameras can't follow. A quiet Sunday morning, the sort Samantha loved, when A drives out to the community theater her mother once volunteered at. She brings a check, first installment of the Samantha Lewis Arts Fellowship, and hands it to a stunned director who still remembers Samantha coaching nervous teenagers through Shakespeare monologues. The fellowship will pay for acting classes, headshots, bus fare. Mundane miracles her mother once scraped together penny by penny. There's no press, only a single Polaroid snapped for the office corkboard. Elizabeth and, hair wind-tossed, smiling exactly like the woman who taught her that a stage can be sanctuary or battlefield depending on who holds the lighting cues. The documentary ends there, but you, the viewer, are left with one last gut-punch question. Who carries the off-screen credits of your life story? The people whose sacrifices never made the highlight reel? Hollywood taught us to worship the marquee name. E.A. Hanks just reminded us every star is propped on unseen scaffolding. Samantha Lewis was that scaffolding, steady until the weight became terminal. Tom Hanks, for all his charm, climbed higher because she held the ladder. And when her hands shook, his fear of the fall made him step away. It's not a villain arc, just a human one, the kind that feels uncomfortably familiar when you strip away the autograph gloss. So what do we do with this not-so-storybook truth? Maybe we grant our heroes permission to be cowards and our cowards a path to redemption. Elizabeth Ann's voiceover in the final frame makes the calculation explicit. He broke me for years, but fracture forced light through places that might never have cracked open otherwise. It's a paradox only survivors understand. Hurt that hammers you into a shape capable of carrying other people's stories. For more of the latest news, check out this video.